Welcome to Foundations of Teaching for Learning. This is week 4, Putting Curriculum to Work. Lecture 3, today will focus on planning the lesson. When we plan our lesson, we always begin with an end in mind. Once the end is clear to us what objectives to be achieved, then we'll think of ways of facilitating that learning, observe and monitor the learning process, and assist in situations and contexts where there is help needed by students. And in the end, we assess and conclude the session. When we talk about beginning with an end in mind, there are 3 important aspects we need to focus on. The first one is statement of desired learning outcome. This is a description of abilities to reproduce, reconstruct, or demonstrate learning. For example, you may want to name the characteristics of an atom, or you may want to convert the sentences from the past to future tense, or recite a poem flawlessly. So these are the objectives we have in mind. Now we want to think about special considerations that you may want to give to students in the class. Are there students with special needs or conditions? For example, some students coming from backgrounds which may be different in terms of using a language. So students coming from different background, non-native speakers may need more help. So teachers may want to pay attention to such situations. And they must also know what kind of prior learning or preconditions necessary for that particular lesson to be continued successfully. So these are the 3 important points you need to bear in mind when you begin a lesson. And here we may also want to look at the teacher activities and student activities. When we introduce, sequence, resource, instruct, debrief, we may want to make sure that it is in line with student activities and understanding. There need to be a synergy between the teacher activity and student activities. Talking about teacher activities, we always start with the introduction and we think about how do we sequence the lessons and what kind of materials that will be helpful as resource in the class, and how do we exactly give instructions to students, clear instructions for their activities, and finally we debrief, discuss the learning activities and how students have understood and responded to what has been taught in the class. Talking about teacher activities, there are 4 more important things that we may want to think about. One is about how important is time management when you are planning a lesson. How do I monitor engagement and change activities during the class? And how do I move the session according to the time planned? And how do I allow for flexibility and student interest? So these are some points that we may want to take into consideration whenever we plan activities. Now let's talk about student activities. It can happen in many ways. It can be individual based, or we can do it in pairs and groups. We used to the individual method most of the time, but now it is interesting to think about how we can encourage more pair and share method and putting children in groups to work on different kind of activities. And also, we also want to think about how do we keep them engaged and ensure that every child is participating in the activities. And also, it's interesting to see to what extent we allow space for students to express themselves, and do we welcome counter arguments from students. And there is also this, in this way, it actually helps students discover what they have and become more creative in their ideas. We have come to the session on assess and conclude. Again, we have 3 important elements under assess and conclude, let's take a look at each one in turn. Under the assess and conclude, we have implementing of assessment. We want to know whether we are doing formative assessment or we can do summative assessment. There are many ways of assessing. In the end, I want to know how well the class went on and what kind of errors the students made and how could we overcome the difficulties the students faced and create more opportunities for their learning. And ending comments are always very important. This can come from both the teacher and students. You want to know how the whole session went today, how were the experiences like for the students, and what went well, and what could be done differently in the next lesson. Eventually, the lesson can be summarized to understand the accomplishment, the challenges, and what needs to be carried forward in the next lesson. Now we have come to the final part on think, pair, and share. With a colleague of yours, you may want to think about how do I manage time and my classroom so that everyone is able to engage with the lesson. What kinds of different groupings that I can use in the classroom and how might I do things differently in the future. Think about these questions and discuss with a friend of yours and get more ideas in creating better learning activities. Thank you very much.